It was early July last year, and I had just graduated from college. Let's be honest, I wasn't exactly an academic superstar. Partying with my buddies seemed more appealing than hitting the books. Unsurprisingly, my GPA wasn't stellar enough for the high-paying jobs I dreamed of. But I wasn't concerned. I just wanted to start working. I scoured São Paulo for jobs, but realized quickly that fresh graduates without much experience were not exactly in high demand. I couldn't bring myself to take up a low-paying gig at a fast food joint or a convenience store. It wasn't that I didn't want to work, I just felt I deserved better. After numerous rejections, I finally settled for a job at a well-known burger chain in the city. The first day, I dragged myself to the restaurant and had a quick chat with the manager. Before I knew it, I was suited up in a stiff uniform and a ridiculous hat. One evening, I noticed a figure following me. My heart raced, and I quickened my pace, hoping it was just a coincidence. But as I turned a corner, the figure did too. Fear surged through me, and I broke into a run, only to slip and fall, scraping my hands and knees on the rough pavement. The figure approached slowly, and as it drew closer, I realized it was João. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, extending a hand to help me up. I felt a mix of relief and embarrassment. "I thought you were someone else," I mumbled, taking his hand. He chuckled softly. "I figured as much. You looked terrified." "I guess I can't shake off what happened," I admitted. João walked me home, and as we talked, I learned more about him. He shared stories of his own struggles and fears, making me feel less alone. By the time we reached my apartment, I felt a bit more at ease. The next few weeks passed without incident. I settled into a routine, focusing on my work and trying to regain a sense of normalcy. João and I grew closer, and his presence became a comforting constant in my life. He would often walk me home after our shifts. One particularly busy evening, I was working the register when a familiar, menacing figure entered the restaurant. My heart sank as I recognized Marcos. His eyes locked onto mine, and a sinister smile spread across his face. He made his way to the counter, pushing past other customers. "Long time no see, rookie," he sneered. I could barely breathe, my mind racing with fear and anxiety. João, noticing the tension, approached us. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. Marcos ignored him, his gaze fixed on me. "How about those fries? Ha! Or did you forget how to make them?" I was paralyzed with fear, unable to respond. João stepped in front of me, shielding me from Marcos. "You need to leave," he said, his tone unwavering. Marcos' smile faded, replaced by a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," he spat before turning and leaving the restaurant. The encounter left me shaken, but João's unwavering support gave me the strength to keep going. Over time, the incidents with Marcos became less frequent, and I began to reclaim my sense of security. João and I continued to grow closer, and his presence became a source of comfort and stability in my life. Months later, on a quiet evening, I received a call from the police. They had finally located Marcos and arrested him for a series of crimes, including assault and robbery. The news brought a sense of relief, but also a lingering unease. The memory of his threats and the fear they instilled in me would never fully disappear. With Marcos behind bars, life began to return to normal. I focused on my job, my friendships, and my future. Joe and I started dating, and his support helped me to heal from the trauma I had experienced. The restaurant became a place of safety and community, where I felt valued and protected. Reflecting on the past year, I realized how much I had grown. The challenges I faced had shaped me into a stronger, more resilient person. While the memory of Marcos would always be a part of my story, it no longer defined me. I had found my strength, my voice, and the support of those who cared about me, and with that, I was ready to face whatever the future held. Working at Freddy's Diner might seem like a normal customer service for, but I swear it's a very tsipori. This is where the strangest things tend to happen, and we've always had our fair share of craziness. Let me tell you about one of the scariest ones I remember. It all started one Wednesday night at Freddy's Diner in Ridgewood. It isn't the biggest diner in the world, but it's not your typical neighborhood joint either. On weekends, the place is packed to the last minute, but on weekdays, it's a different story. That night, everything was especially quiet. Maybe it was because it was the end of the month and most people hadn't yet been paid, or perhaps because of the holiday the day before, which had everyone tired and wanting to be at home. Who knows? The truth is, we had no customers, so when this guy came in, I was surprised. There were only 2 of us employees, and we were about to close, my partner Mark and me. Mark had gone out to take out the trash, and I was getting ready to close the register. So with this guy coming in, I had to take his order and also cook it. The guy looked normal, a little distracted, but I figured that was normal. Who doesn't get a little distracted at that hour? I decided to take his food to the table, which wasn't necessary. But hey, we were alone, and it never hurts to make a nice gesture. Mark came back and gave me a knowing look as if to say he wanted to leave, but couldn't leave the place a mess while this customer was still here. We were chatting quietly when suddenly everything got weird. The guy started yelling like crazy, "What the hell is this? This is rotten. Everything is rotten." He was referring to his taco, the fries, and even the soda he had ordered. At the time, I thought he was totally crazy, but I went over to see what was wrong. Then he said, "Try this. The ingredients are rotten." Truth be told, I couldn't believe what he was saying. I tried the taco I had brought him, and surprised, it was great, perfect, fresh, and delicious. I even went out of my way to make it good. What was he talking about? I was rather surprised at how good it was because I am not a great cook. "This is not rotten, sir. It's perfectly fine," I replied as I continued chewing. But then the guy got worse, yelling at me that I was crazy for enjoying spoiled food. "Are you sick? You disgust me," he said. This really got on top of my patience. He had gone over the edge. So I replied, "That's enough. I'm not going to let you talk to me like that." And that's when things started to get out of control. The man became enraged, got up from his chair, and approached me. He wasn't particularly tall or strong, but the craziness in his eyes gave me chills. Right there in that bizarre situation, I realized that I had made a big mistake in challenging him. The atmosphere felt heavy, and truth be told, I was very uncomfortable. So I kept thinking about how I was going to handle this situation in the best possible way. But the guy looked like he was about to foam at the mouth, and in the blink of an eye, he grabbed the Coke off the table with force. "You like this crap? Take it, it's all yours." In an instant, he grabbed my neck and pushed me against the table, and with his other hand, he tried to shove the Coke into my mouth, pressing it down hard. Suddenly, I began to choke on the liquid that was spilling out and seeping into my nostrils as I struggled to keep my mouth shut. At that moment, Mark, who had already returned, didn't hesitate to jump on the guy and help me. Fortunately, he managed to knock the guy to the ground, but the guy reacted quickly and mounted Mark, starting to punch him in the face non-stop. Seeing this, quick as lightning, I rammed the guy, making him let go of my partner. But instead of joining the fight, I helped Mark up and dragged him to the kitchen. As we ran, the guy got up more furious than before, but instead of following us, he started yelling like crazy. "Do you think you can make fun of me? That you're going to give me rotten food and get away with it? This is no joke." From the kitchen, we watched as the guy started trashing the restaurant. He smashed the computer, broke the cameras, and even took out the fish tank we had on the counter. He was completely unhinged, out of his mind. As the man continued his rampage through the restaurant, Mark and I decided it was time to call 911. I explained to the police that we needed urgent help, and just then, the guy, having finished trashing the counter, seemed to have calmed down a bit and was heading for the door. However, although we didn't know it at the time, it was a trap. Seeing him leave, I ran to the broken fish tank to rescue the fish while Mark frantically searched for the door key. But when I finally placed the last fish in a glass of water, I heard a noise in the doorway. Unfortunately, Mark didn't get to close the door in time. Just as he reached the door to pass the key, the madman appeared again. This time he didn't open it like when he arrived. It looked like he had been waiting right there to attack. Mark tried to react but fell to the floor, and it all happened so fast that I could barely take in what was happening. Before I knew it, I was watching my partner being beaten by that madman with a baseball bat. Consumed with panic, I left the glass with the fish on the counter and ran to help Mark, but I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw the man coming towards me with the bat raised high. Without thinking, I ran into the storeroom and closed the door. Fortunately, I was able to take shelter there, but the guy was on the other side, trying to get in at all costs. All he wanted to do was hit me for no logical reason. The scene became even more violent when he started hitting the door with his bat, causing enormous damage to the small metal door. Everything was so chaotic and surreal that I could hardly believe what was happening, and each blow sounded more lethal than the last. I immediately started looking for something to defend myself, a stick, a knife, whatever. But I only found a broomstick that wasn't supposed to be there, but luckily for me, it was. I thought it might do me some good, and just as I was getting ready, the guy kicked the door hard and managed to open it. When he did, he looked for me with his eyes and, without hesitation, lunged at me. I tried to get defensive with the broomstick, but that didn't last at all. In less than 2 seconds, the man lunged at me, completely ignoring that I was going to try to defend myself. And before I could react, he began to beat me savagely with the bat. At that moment, I knew I had lost my mind. The look on his face was terrifying, like a wild animal determined to unleash his unreserved rage. He didn't say a word, he only growled, and each blow he gave me was harder than the previous one. Any attempt to defend myself was futile. At one point, I simply dropped to the ground, covering the vital parts of my body and turning my back to him. He didn't care where he hit me, all he wanted was to keep hitting me. At that moment, I really thought I was going to die. I could hear my bones creaking with each blow. When he hit me in the back, I was out of breath and coughing in pain, feeling like I was going to collapse completely. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. It was Mark, who, although he was also badly hurt, lunged at the man again, but failed once more. The madman knocked him down and had every intention of dealing him a fatal blow. But just as he was about to do so, the police siren was heard. At that moment, the guy seemed to come to his senses at the sound. Then his face filled with terror. He didn't want to get caught, so he dropped the bat and ran out the back door. I tried to yell to the police to stop him, but we were both in so much pain we could barely speak. The guy got away, and in the blink of an eye, the cops were with us, asking what had happened to us. As I waited for an ambulance to be called, I realized that my injuries were almost as bad as Mark's, who, although he received fewer blows, was hit several times in the head. In the end, we managed to recover somewhat, but neither of us went back to work at Freddy's Diner. We enjoyed the work, but the truth is that after that, we were scared to face what happened. The guy who attacked us was never caught or identified. The police only have a video of him trashing the place. No one knows if he was a madman or just a violent sadist. But the truth is, he's dangerous, and the people of Ridgewood don't feel safe as long as he's on the loose. There is always that fear that he might come back and repeat the madness with other employees. "Can you cover for me tonight?" Sam asked, knowing I had nothing planned. I was supposed to leave in about 30 minutes, but that meant I had to stay for the night shift. It was hard to resist those piercing blue eyes of his, so I agreed. Sam and I both worked at a fast food restaurant in downtown Berlin, and I was always grateful to him for helping me get a job here, especially at a time when I was struggling with bills. My parents were trying, but they couldn't cover all my needs, so I was left to fend for myself. I was in college, but right now we were on break, so I didn't have to run back to class as soon as I got off work. This meant I could stay for the next shift. Sam waved at me as he hurried out the door, probably to see his girlfriend. They had been together for about 3 months and were the most adorable couple at the place. The truth is, I did this only because it was for Sam, otherwise I was really very tired. I tried to take orders as fast as I could, dispatching customers just as quickly because I just wanted to go home and rest. It was 8 p.m., and there wasn't much I could do beyond school. I wasn't a party girl by any means. I knew the world out there could be tough, so I tried to take care of myself as much as possible. Whoever had the last shift was in charge of cleaning the restaurant, so I assumed that was my job at the time. I looked at the clock and saw that it was already 8:30 p.m., so I sighed wearily and continued serving the customers who were still arriving. Finally, the last group left, and I started to clean the tables before I could leave. It was about 9:30 p.m. at the time, and I had just finished the last one when I heard the front door open. I turned to tell the new customer that we were already closed, but I froze. It was a huge guy with a scary face. He had 3 piercings above his right eyebrow and a bushy beard. His small eyes seemed to get lost in his huge face. The guy was really intimidating. Swallowing hard, I approached him and said, "I'm sorry, but we're already closed." He looked at me, then glanced around the place and nodded to himself before going to sit down at one of the tables, the one I had just cleaned. "I just want to stay here for a while." "When you're about to close, I'll leave," he said with an uneasy attitude. I felt uncomfortable but nodded, not knowing how to say no to him. I went back to cleaning, but I couldn't shake the bad feeling. I noticed that the guy seemed nervous, glancing at the door every now and then, as if he was waiting for someone to come looking for him. I didn't know if it was safe to be alone with him, especially since he didn't look like a normal customer. I finally finished cleaning and was about to tell him I was leaving when suddenly I heard a noise at the doorway. Our eyes met just as he pulled a gun from his belt. At that moment, I started screaming and ran to the counter. Then the front door opened abruptly, and two guys came in screaming. One of them let out a curse while the other charged at the guy who was sitting down. The guy with the gun fired into the ceiling, and the new men hit the floor. Hearing them hit the floor, I immediately hid behind the counter, silently cursing myself for leaving my phone in the locker room, so I had no way to alert the police. At that moment, screams, insults, and gunshots rang out. It was complete chaos out there. I covered my ears and tried to make myself as invisible as possible. I knew they couldn't see me behind the counter, and I prayed they would forget me, but I was terrified. Suddenly, the gunshots stopped, and all I could hear was some kind of discussion, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Carefully, I peeked over the counter and saw that the first guy was on the floor, pleading while the other two were pointing the rubble. "Just give me more time. I'll get the money, I promise," he shouted, his eyes wild. "Shut up! We've heard enough," one of them answered, and without hesitation, he shot him in the chest. I froze and could barely hold back a scream, but I mumbled, "Oh no," and that was enough for their gazes to fly towards me. Panic swept over me entirely, and with no other escape, I ran for the back door, my Converse slipping on the floor. I knew they were after me, and that they weren't planning on letting me go, especially after seeing someone get killed. My heart was pounding uncontrollably, and terror was coursing through my veins. I never in my life thought that such a situation could happen to me. Once I got through the door, I heard two gunshots and a shout, but I didn't pay attention and just kept running. My heart almost leaped out of my chest, but I couldn't stop. It was escape or die. The street was dark, but I managed to see a group of people ahead, and I thought that if I could reach them, maybe they could help me. "Please help me," I shouted as I approached, the sound of the gunshots still echoing in my ears. The men behind me stopped when they noticed the people ahead, and when I turned my head, I saw them turn around and run in the other direction. "Those men just killed someone," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and my body began to shake as I realized the magnitude of what had happened. If those guys or their shots had hit me, I would have been victim number 2 for the night. The people nearby called the police immediately and decided to wait with me while I told them everything. Then we walked back to the restaurant, and there was the guy lying on the ground, a pool of blood forming around him. His eyes were closed, but it looked like he was still breathing. I couldn't believe that this had all started out as a quiet night and ended in a complete nightmare. The police arrived quickly and took control of the situation. They called an ambulance for the man on the ground and rushed him to the hospital, where they said he was in critical condition. They then began to interrogate me, asking me to describe the men who had attacked me in detail. It wasn't hard because I still had their faces etched in my mind. One of them was of medium height and bald, with crooked teeth, while the other was a little taller and had a long, lean body. The police promised to contact me if they needed more information, but really I just wanted to go home and rest. The night had been exhausting, and I was terrified. Fortunately, the police dropped me off at my apartment, and as soon as I arrived, I threw myself on the bed trying to sleep, but to no avail. The scene of the shooting kept going round and round in my head and replayed over and over again like a movie on repeat. Watching something like that happen on TV is one thing, but living it in the flesh is something else entirely. I still felt tremors all over my body. I'd never been so scared as when those guys were chasing me, and it looked like I was going to fall into their hands. Finally, I managed to fall asleep, realizing that I would never take a night shift again. After the incident, I continued working for a couple more weeks at the restaurant, but soon quit as I couldn't be there without remembering what had happened there at night.